How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the corner. I'm the game as always, and tonight, even, I want to talk about some things. Now, Jazz added me in his Discord and asked for my opinion on this, and truth be told, that's the only reason I'm recording this video. I wasn't actually going to even comment on this, primarily, because I believe the Game Awards is rigged. Yes, that's right. I believe it's completely and wholly rigged. I don't think there's a single legitimate vote cast in it and the reason why is because everyone's views are shifted and guided, uh, thanks in large part to the influencer and content creator culture around uh, the Game Awards and kind of awards in general, right? Much like the movie awards and whatnot, right? But but he asked for my opinion. He said he wanted to know my opinion, so I'm gonna get it now. Uh, Typically, I don't have a script, and I still don't have a script, but I do have some notes written down to try and guide this video along because I want to try and make it as concise as I can. Okay. Um, and so the first question we have to ask is what is the criteria for a game of the year? Now, I've already watched his video. It's an amazing video. Go and watch it. Link in the description. But what is the criteria for being a of the year, right? Whether it's video games, movies, literature, et cetera, right? And for the Game Awards, it's actually a little bit tricky because the Game Awards themselves never actually list criteria for games to be nominated. Instead, they imply through patterns that they should be about things like storytelling, innovation, emotional impact, et cetera, right? And these kind of patterns, these implications, largely are present within single player games. Um, Things like storytelling are not really baked into multiplayer games. Now, sure, there are some multiplayer games, some online games that have a story, right? MMOs are a great example, such as World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, Elder Scrolls Online, right? These games have a story, and for the most part, they're pretty decent. I would say even some are pretty good. Final Fantasy XIV, my beloved, and World of Warcraft up until you hit fucking pandas. But these games, by and large, are, even if they have great storytelling themselves, even if they have emotional impact and innovation, you don't generally see them, offered up as game of the year. And I'll get to the reason why here in a little bit. And so the next point I want to get to is what makes a game worthy of being nominated for Game of the Year or even become Game of the Year, right? The thing we have to think about this is Game of the Year about cultural impact, innovation? Is it simply which game people are talking about the most, right? These are, generally speaking, the most important aspects when you think about what makes a game worthy of Game of the Year, right? And when we look at previous Game of the Year games, um, if we look back, this is on Wikipedia, right? And we look back to like 2014, right? You see games like Dragon Age Inquisition, Bayonetta, Dark Souls 2. You do have Hearthstone in here. You have Shadow of Mordor, right? For 2014. Now, Hearthstone, you could argue, is a multiplayer game. It's pretty much required, or rather built around multiplayer. And we'll come back to that point in a little bit. I'm looking at you, Jez. You know why. You know what you said. Um, then we look at 2015, and we see, by and large, just single player games. Although it could again be argued that Super Mario Maker is a multiplayer game. I mean, after all, it's kind of built around being multiplayer, right? With creating a level, then sending it out for other people to play. Then in 2016, we actually have two multiplayer games in Overwatch and Titanfall 2. But we do have Doom Inside and Uncharted 4, right? Now, of course, Doom did not win, which I think is a shame, but Overwatch did win, which is a multiplayer game. And then down here in 2017, this is, again, another interesting year because we do have one multiplayer game being nominated, though it did not win, interestingly enough, right? Then again in 2018, yet again, only one that gets nominated but doesn't win. This might not be nominated. I've never actually really watched the Game Awards, but you can see what I mean. Then down here in 2019, we see a shift. Okay, and if you pointed it out, if you've seen it, pause the video, leave a comment, letting me know what you saw, and then after I reveal it, reply to that and see if tell me if you were right. Got to feed that algorithm or something, right? I don't know. I don't fucking care about the algorithm. But my point is, down here in 2019, we don't see a single multiplayer game. Although I guess you could argue Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is a multiplayer game. It was built around being a single player game, right? And the multiplayer aspect is like an addition, right? Then in 2020, yet again, we see single player games, and this time it is truly only single player games, right? Then in 2021, um, It Takes Two actually wins, is nominated and wins, right? Um, 2020 or 2021, sorry, 2022, we see again no multiplayer games. 2023, again, no multiplayer games. Then 2024, just last year, we see no multiplayer games. Now I know some people are going to try and argue that Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring are multiplayer games, and by definition and by technicality, yes, those do have multiplayer components built into them. But when you think of games like Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3, you do not think multiplayer, you think single player experience, right? And so we see by and large, while especially in the early days there were multiplayer games nominated, I think it was only twice. Yeah, It Takes Two and Overwatch. Only twice did they ever win a game of the year, right? And I think for the most part, to try and kind of answer the question of what makes a game worthy of game of the year, it largely depends, and that's going to be a running theme throughout this videos. It largely depends on the game. Like Overwatch, for example, is undeniably a game that had a huge cultural impact. This was the talk of the town when this game first came out and for several years after. It Takes Two is another game that had a pretty good cultural impact. It had innovation under its side. It had a good story, right? And the mechanics of the game were really, really good. And so, one thing you'll notice with all of these is the mechanics of these games and these games in general, when they came out, Inquisition's a little fuzzy, but when these games came out, they were considered exceptional for their time, right? The Last of Us Part 2, I know there's a lot of controversy around it, a lot of people that hated it after they actually got their hands on it, or at least initially. A lot of it was due to previous hype from The Last of Us, right? Um, Elden Ring, I mean, it's a game from FromSoft. FromSoft, while their games aren't necessarily for everyone, there's you cannot doubt, or you cannot really cast doubt on their cultural impact that they had on the gaming genre, on the gaming sphere as a whole, right? Now, moving on from that, I want to talk about, does influence from big creators skew public perception of what deserves recognition? And this is a huge talking point here because of the entire reason I'm making this video, right? Asmongold versus Shroud. Who's right? Who's wrong? What's going on, right? So if you didn't know, okay, Shroud made a tweet calling his followers to go and vote for Arc Raiders, a live service extraction shooter, to be nominated to win Game of the Year over Expedition 33. Asmongold then tweeted, replied to him, calling him a liar and basically telling him to go and play Expedition 33 first. Right now, I've not played Arc Raiders. Okay, but I've seen a lot of gameplay about it. I've watched plenty of streams, I've watched plenty of gameplay. I know how the game plays, and it's also not that hard to figure out when you hear the term extraction shooter. Okay, you drop into a map, you go around, you loot, you go to points of interest, you collect loot, you kill a few people or work with some people, and then you go and you extract, right? Or you die along the way, right? It's an extraction shooter, right? It did not really evolve the genre or innovate on the genre itself in any way. But that is not to say that it is not a good game. From everything I'm seeing, from content creators, from influencers, from everyone I've seen playing this game, they all seem to really enjoy playing it, especially Co, right? And I have played and beaten and basically 100%ed Expedition 33. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull this up on my Steam profile so that you can all see it, right? So right here, you can see this is it. Now I've put about 70 hours. I've gotten most all of the achievements, right? Um, And so this is an absolutely stellar and amazing game. Okay. Expedition 33 tells a beautiful story. Okay. It has had a cultural impact on everyone that plays it. It innovated on the turn based RPG genre. Okay. It has amazing characters, amazing world building, right? Literally everything about this game is absolutely amazing. The music's beautiful, the graphics are beautiful, the combat's amazing, everything, right? And so, not only that, but to compare Arc Raiders to uh, Expedition 33, which I don't even think is honestly a fair comparison, just simply because one of them is multiplayer and the other is single player. Um, Everything I've seen from Expedition 33, from everyone who's played it, everyone who's seen it, everyone says the same thing, that the game is amazing in all aspects, right? Contrast that to Arc Raiders. I have seen people say that they don't like it, right? And not because they don't like extraction shooters, but because they just don't like the game. They think the game is bad. Okay. Now, I'm sure there are people out there that think Expedition 33 is bad, and everyone is entitled to their opinions, even if they're wrong, right? Or even if I disagree, as I should say, right? But something else I want to kind of talk about and give some more perspective on if influence from big creators can skew public perception. I want to talk about Baldur's Gate 3 for a moment. Baldur's Gate 3 had some of the Critical Role cast members in it. Okay. And Critical Role, when Baldur's Gate 3 was coming out and the 7 years leading up to its release, D&D was steadily growing in popularity, and a lot of people who had already bought into Baldur's Gate 3, the beta, the alpha, whatever they want to call it, right? All of them had already played it. They knew this game was going to be amazing. Larian Studios has a really good track record with Divinity Original Sin, right? But again, Critical Role's cast was a part of this game, and they were a part of promoting it, right? And so, does influence from big creators skew public perception of what deserves recognition? Absolutely. 100%. Okay. Now, I'm going to keep going. What makes single player games, right? We already looked here. What makes them win consistently, right, over multiplayer games, right? We see Dragon Age Inquisition, The Witcher 3, right? Breath of the Wild, God of War, Sekiro, right? Why do all of these games win over multiplayer games like Monster Hunter World, which was touted as one of the best Monster Hunter games to have been released, right? And part of what makes them win over the multiplayer games is even if the single player games you play for 70 hours, like I did for Expedition 33, right? These games leave a lasting impact that gets people that on its own has people talking about these games far more than a multiplayer game. For example, League of Legends, okay? Undoubtedly, when it first came out, and to this day, it's had a cultural impact, right? It kind of brought MOBAs to the mainstream, right? But you don't really hear people talking about it. It's not something that will come up in a casual conversation, right? Whereas Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo, that can come up organically in a conversation. Expedition 33, God of War, Doom, Quake, right? All these single player games. Now, granted, Quake was uh, largely multiplayer, especially towards the end of its life. But these largely single player games during their time come up very often and commonly in normal conversation, right? Or at least can, and has a greater degree of probability in doing so than multiplayer games like Monster Hunter World, League of Legends, Fortnite, and so on, right? And this, I believe, is largely because those games are still ongoing. They're always in the public's consciousness, so no one thinks to bring them up because by and large people assume that everyone else is already aware of their existence, aware of what's going on, at least in a general sense, right? And by and large, for gamers, they don't really care about talking about multiplayer games like they do single player games, right? And part of this is because of the lack of a story. There's not really much to talk about, right? Now, this also kind of goes into my next one, which is why do multiplayer games not win Game of the Year? And again, things like Fortnite, Apex Legend, Valorant, League of Legends, right? Undoubtedly, these games are cultural hits. They have a cultural impact, but they don't win Game of the Year. They're not even nominated. And just to finish this tangent off, to finish this off, this is by and large because they are evergreen, evolving games. Okay, and evergreen just kind of means that there's always something new being added into them, right? They're never an actual complete package like a single player game is, right? Expedition 33, it's a complete package. right? That game has been shipped. There's not really any updates that are planned for it. I don't think the developers are even planning any DLC. Um, and so, I mean, same goes for Baldur's Gate 3. It was shipped. There were some updates and patches and whatnot, but Larian Studios doesn't have any plans whatsoever to release like DLC or anything for the game. And so this brings me to my next part is what does value mean in video games when it comes to game of the year, right? And this is the big point for game of the year, right? Like what what gives the game value, right? Is it time spent in the game? Is it the emotional depth, replayability, artistic merit, right? Jazz brought up a good point where multiplayer games, those give you thousands of hours of replayability and entertainment, but again, they're never brought up as game of the year, like Final Fantasy XIV, for example. As much as I love that game, it's never nominated for game of the year, right? And by and large, I believe this is because multiplayer games, right? Though they have that replayability built in, there's not any real emotional depth. You don't get grabbed by the game and like just kind of sucked into it, right? You'll play for thousands of hours, but realistically, and I'm looking at you specifically, Jazz, how much of your time playing that game can you actually recall? Like if you had to sit down and just start rattling off everything you've done, how much of it can you actually recall, right? Like I put in thousands of hours into League of Legends before I stopped playing, but I honestly can't tell you a single thing that I really did in that game. I remember maybe a few moments that I played during it that have stuck with me, but that's about it, right? Um, even World of Warcraft, back when I played it, there's not many moments when playing it that I can really recall that stuck with me, right? Um, and most of the memories I can recall about World of Warcraft were because other people were involved. It wasn't the game that made those memories stick. It was the people that I was playing the game with, right? Now, does Arc Raiders deserve Game of the Year more than Expedition 33? Depends. Because to say something is deserving depends entirely on what you yourself value. Okay. Do you value artistry or community experience? Do you value the authorial intent, the intent of the author, or do you value the emergent gameplay more? Right. And this is why this is so extremely subjective because what I value in a game and what you value in a game are going to be different. And not only that, but it's going to be different game to game, even. So, what I value in World of Warcraft, for example, is not going to be the same as what I value in Final Fantasy XIV. Just like neither of those are going to be the same as what I value in Expedition 33 or Final Fantasy VII, right? These are games that all have their own value, right? So that is by and large the questions, right? I've got a few more though. Okay, so if you came primarily for my thoughts on Game of the Year and Game Awards, you pretty much have them, although there's a little bit at the very end. But I want to just place this in here because I heard Jazz say that you cannot play Dota 2 without the multiplayer. And technically, you're wrong. And the reason you're wrong is because Dota 2 has bots. That's right. You can play an entire match with 9 bots. Same way you can play an entire match with 9 bots in League of Legends. Technically speaking, the only reason you can't play these without an internet connection is because the devs require you to always be online so they can track your data and harvest it. I mean, League of Legends has kernel level anti cheat after all. They can literally scan your entire computer and there's nothing you can do about it. But another thing Jazz said is, and I brought this up a little while ago, is that you never spend more time on a single player game than a multiplayer game. And there's a few things here. So, first thing I want to directly address it because spending time does not necessarily equate to a deeper impact. I already talked before about how, there are games, multiplayer games even, that I've played that for hundreds or thousands of hours that I genuinely can't really recall anything about, right? I recall a little bit of the story, but that's about it. Um, and so the time spent does not necessarily mean it has a deeper impact on the individual, right? And that's by and large what's going to dictate whether a person thinks a game is worth game of the year is how much did it impact them, right? How much do they resonate with that game and how much time do they spend actually talking about it? I mean, Jazz, for example, that motherfucker doesn't stop yapping about Path of Exile now. We got that motherfucker so far hooked into that game that man has been non-stop playing Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 ever since Path of Exile 2 first came out, okay, or launched into early access. Okay. That motherfucker has basically played that game non-stop every day on stream and yapped about it since it fucking launched into early access. Okay. Like, that is a game that, like, by that metric, should, and I think should be a contender for Game of the Year. Now, should it win Game of the Year over something like Expedition 33? I don't think so, right? But I do think it should at least be nominated, right? So basically, again, it boils down to that idea of what do you value more? Multiplayer has longevity, but single player games offer closure. They offer an experience and an end to that experience. It's not something that just continues. As I said before, multiplayer games are never a complete package because they're never finished, right? And then the last thing I want to touch on before I end this video is, do single player games have an intrinsic bias towards them, right? This kind of thing, I think, when it comes to like the game awards, I think it stems from how awards, especially the game awards, is sort of structured to mimic film and literature, when it comes to handing out awards, right? It values the authored experiences over the communal ones. Um, and generally speaking, they are a complete package, right? Most movies do not have several more planned, like, say, the MCU, right? Most movies are, this is the movie, this is the whole thing, all right, we're done with this, right? And then they move on. There's not a second one, right? There's not a movie two, movie three, movie four, movie the spinoff, right? But I think that maybe it's time that we get rid of the year title as a generic catch-all, right? Like it currently is, and we get separate game of the year categories. So rather, this is the all-time game of the entire year, the single best game ever. We split it into things like the best multiplayer ongoing game, right? versus things like the best narrative game, right? Versus the best live service game. Now you might ask, well, what's the difference between a multiplayer ongoing game and a live service game? Arc Raiders is a live service game. Elden Ring is an ongoing multiplayer game, right? Because it's still ongoing. It technically has multiplayer, right? Or even one of these Super Smash Brothers games, right? In doing this, it better represents and better reflects how games influence gamers' lives, right? How it impacts them, right? Because I might like Elden Ring, but I like Expedition 33 more. So I'm not going to vote for Elden Ring over Expedition 33 in a Game of the Year category, right? But if there was best narrative and a best ongoing multiplayer game, well, now I can vote for both of them. Elden Ring for ongoing multiplayer game and Expedition 33 for narrative game, right? And so those are my thoughts about all this, and that's what I have to say. So that's it. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for joining me on this tangent. If you liked the video, hit like and subscribe. If you didn't like the video, hit dislike, leave a comment, let me know why, and I will see you all next time.